Thank you so much for all the warm welcome, lovely introductions, stellar people that I have today. Prasad, Sanjay, veterans in their own right. I have had the good fortune to speak to them on several locations, and I am super excited about today's conversation. People who have heard me say this, they say this, I say this all the time. But then what can I do about technology? Because technology is such a fast-paced industry, right? It keeps me on my toes. For the past 20 years, it's kept me on my toes. I'm sure for the next 20, if I got willing, if I'm there in this industry, I'll keep on doing the same. Prasad, Sanjay, very warm welcome. Always a pleasure having both of you. So I think we've all heard the stellar introductions of both of you. And so I'll jump right in. I want to maximize the time that's given to all of us. And I'm sure for the audience who's joined in, would love to hear from both of you. So let me ask both Prasad and Sanjay, and probably I'll just probably start with Prasad and I'll request Sanjay to come in. So Prasad, the thing is this: so we're talking today about a very topical and relevant topic because when we speak about business continuity, disaster recovery, I personally feel like you had in history, while how we bifurcated AD by BC, before Christ, Anno Domini. I think in modern history, and 50 years hence going forward, or 100 years going forward, we'll see the world pre-pandemic and post-pandemic.
Yes.
And it's very relevant. This bifurcation happens from a BCDR standpoint. I'll tell you why. Because when the pandemic struck, the very core of business continuity changed.
Correct.
Right? Now, given this context, and as we've been discussing, in our one-on-one conversation, Prasad, Sanjay, you also, how do you, view business resilience differently today? Because a lot has changed. Completely over to you, Prasad. All ears.
Sure. Thank you so much, Aplak. Thanks for this opportunity having me on this conversation. I think what you said is absolutely right. So before pandemic and after pandemic has completely changed. So before pandemic, the question was like, based on the domain or vertical that we operate, right? Whether we will be facing the cyber attack or not was a question, right? But after pandemic, looking at the cyber attacks happening, like take an example of Colonial Pipeline, AIMS, or the one of a sweet maker in Nagpur, right? The question is no more whether we'll be attacked or not. The real question now is how well we are prepared, right? And how well we are going to respond or recover from the attack. Okay? So the paradigm has completely changed, right? We have to be in the next gear to prepare ourselves for business resiliency. Right? And as we were discussing about it, right? So earlier, the recovery or resiliency was required only in cases of where there is an accidental deletion of information or hardware failure of a server or a storage device, right? But with the technology advancement, I think the occurrence of these kind of incidents has reduced. The hardware technologies have become very, very robust. The RAID technologies has become very robust. So the probability of data deletion or accidental failure of disk has reduced, but it has been replaced by cyber attacks like ransomware, right? Which is a topmost attack or the risk that we look at the business today, right? So and then post-pandemic, we have seen a lot of such incidences where ransomware has been asked, and the business has struggled to recover themselves with minimum RPO and RTO. I think that's where we have to look at a very different approach of recovery using advanced technologies in the business.
I could not have put it more succinctly, Prasad. I mean, as an analyst, there's a flow to our conversations. I love the way you put it. I'll tell you one, just to corroborate further to what you just said. You spoke about ransomware. Prasad, according to some estimates that I read recently, ransomware was the number one threat vector in 2022. 1 out of 4 attacks was a ransomware attack. So no wonder when we speak about business, because there was a tectonic shift.
Yes.
5 years prior to this, when we spoke about BCDR, we never spoke about cybersecurity.
Yeah.
suddenly we understand that is a very integral element where to have a a 360 view of business continuity, disaster recovery. It's important we integrate the very fabric of cybersecurity in it, right? Also, like you said, very importantly, you spoke about remedial. I think the entire world is talking about, let's not only talk about from a reactive perspective, but how proactively am I prepared for resilience? Sanjay, I'll get you into this because, like I said, I know both of you have tremendous knowledge in the space. Taking a cue from what just Prasad said, how can companies like yours and for that matter, any organization of different industries also ensure that you are resilient to such occurrences? Because let's call it out, it's not possible for us to limit that because you are bound to have a ransomware attack or any cybersecurity attack, and natural calamities like the pandemic are anyhow beyond our hand. How do I make sure that I'm resilient towards that so that my uptime is literally close to zero? I mean, which is typically what any CIOs or CISO dreams for, having literally a RTO, RPO almost close to zero. Your views to this, Sanjay?
Okay, so as you said, and Prasad said, during the before the COVID, things was the like the homegrown application, the on-premises applications, which can be accessed by the on-premises. So when the COVID started, the things, applications and everything moving on the cloud, and then they were on a public-facing application. They converted into public-facing application. So definitely, the attack surface got increased. The number of attacks got increased. If you see the MITRE report, if you see the Gartner reports, the type of attack, the patterns, and definitely the ransomware is one of them. So this is very easy to take entry from the user laptop, the administrator laptop, and get the access of the data center. Either it's on cloud, you have hosted services on the cloud, or it's on premises. So definitely in this case, the disaster chances could be the more. So how do we recover for the resilient and all, like the backup, encryption backup? Second thing is RPO. RTO is definitely decided by the business committee, and then the business committee steering members, and then who are involved in the matrix, like what has to do. So in terms also, who is available for the disaster recovery, who will be the secondary person. So in this case, if I say the recovery point objective is like how much data we can bear as a loss, the data lost. And when we say the recovery time objective is like how much time is required to get the recovery of the application for the critical application to make it live on the businesses. So things is getting resolved. People are creating like the on and the backup house. I mean BCDR sync between the either on-premises or cloud to cloud, or like cloud as a services for disaster recovery. So that reduce the RTO and MTTR.
So, Sanjay, I take your points. I'll probably get Prasad into the conversation. So, like you said, and I love what you just said, the challenges typically a BCDR was kicked in when you had accident deletion or say or a natural calamity or a geopolitical tension, so on and so forth. Those the threat vectors and the kind of challenges have really increased. Now, considering that, I'm assuming companies like yours, have periodic audits in place, to check, to have a checks and balance in place that, are we doing good on RTO, RPO? Are we equipped to face a challenge? The question to you is there a is there a timely validation to reassess? Because your RTO, RPO also needs to change with time,
Right.
right? A, because I see both of you are experts and there's huge gathering of ideas listening to us today. A, how do you decide is a time when I need to change that, and what are some of the key elements that are needed for our audience to make a note of them? And okay, let's not make it too big a question. Let me ask you this question, and then probably ask Sanjay the second half.
So, Sanjay, I'm just extending to what Sanjay has said, and then I'll continue with your question, right? So,
Yeah.
see, when we talk about resiliency, right, and recovery from an cyber attack, right, there are 6 different phases in which we plan our resiliency, okay, or business continuity planning. And I'll majorly talk about first 2 phases, which are really, really important, right? The first phase is preparation phase, where we identify what are my most critical assets in the organization, right? What is a crown jewel that I need to protect, right? What is the data which is most critical to the business that needs a faster recovery in case of incident, right? What is going to be my roles and responsibility of each individual and each function in the organization, right? If an attack happens, what is that my top management or CXOs are going to do? What is that the IT team is going to do? What is that the business communication team is going to do? How are we going to communicate to the customer? So this entire phase of preparation is very, very important, because ultimately that gives you a confidence that you will be responding in a very predictable manner to any disruption to your business. That's number one, and which is very important. And the second very important phase is detection. Okay, earlier you are able to detect any attack or any anomaly in your network, better as the possibilities of containment and recovery. Okay, so these are going to be very, very important phases. Of course, it gets followed by the remaining phases of eradication and recovery and post recovery steps. But I think these two steps are very important. And the first phase also tells you that what kind of processes and what kind of technology that you should have in place to meet your business requirements of RPO and RTO. Okay, because once you identify what is critical, then only you'll be able to decide how do you recover it, right? And as you rightly said, the RPO, RTO, or any other parameter of business continuity and recovery will change over a period of time, depending on the kind of projects that you're delivering, the vertical in which your customers are, right? If I'm working with a BFSI customer, then obviously RPO and RTOs will be very stringent and different as compared to if I'm working with a supply chain or a manufacturing kind of customer.
Absolutely right.
So
please, sorry.
Yeah. So I think periodic review of the business continuity management and the business continuity plan in itself is a very crucial activity, and in our organization that happens every quarter. Okay, it's not every year; it happens every quarter, wherein all these parameters are verified, ensuring that we are meeting the business requirement in case of any recovery needed.
Prasad, you spoke about a very interesting point about you spoke about maintaining and managing crown jewels.
Yeah.
And I'll bring an element because as you're aware, Teal, when we do our panels, right, we ensure we have a 360 view to this, where it's not just the analyst or the syllabus CIO, it's also our audience. What do they think? It makes the entire process very democratic. So here's our first exhibit. So, in our first question, we asked what are some of the key focus areas for your organization while creating a BCDR strategy.
Correct.
And very, very succinctly pointed out by you, Prasad, 65% have suggested securing critical infrastructure / applications, which is what your crown jewels is all about. It is only superseded by the number one option here, which was timely recovery of data operation, which is a fair ask, because while speaking of BCDR, I mean, you would talk about data operations, data protection, and recovery time, but I think very closely followed by security. Because I think like you said, this, because there is a cost involved, there is planning to be done. You cannot look at all your applications in a singular fashion. You've got to be selective and strategize around that. Right. So I think it's a great point from you, Sanjay. I'll extend this conversation. I'll probably, like I said, I'll get you into this, right? So as Prasad spoke about, some of the ways how they look at periodic audits and find a balance in mitigating risk. In your view, what are some of the commonly overlooked areas while creating this plan? Because it's not easy to get it right always. I'll tell you why this is a great question, Sanjay. I'm sorry to call this out, is because as a CIO, as a CISO, you may be aware what is required. But at times, the business buy-in does not happen. It happens from the top.
Definitely.
So, in your view, what is some of the commonly overlooked areas while framing a BCDR strategy?
Okay.
Sanjay.
So basically, when we think about the DR and the business resiliency from the top areas, so number thing is now BCP and DR is going in an advanced way. Example, the business impact analysis, as the Prasad says, the critical applications, what should be the RPO, what should be the RTO. plus recovery times, like what loss can be bear by the companies. So like example, there's a calculation and the formula is like single loss expectancy. If one time application goes down, how much loss would be there? If annual loss expectancy in case of multiple failure in the year, how much loss can be bear by the company? What are the losses? There's a formula of BCP and DR when we build it or for the business resiliency. Third thing is like before starting this exercise, we should go with the business assessment, like risk assessment, and then definitely the business impact analysis. Then it go on a next step. How we build it BCP and the DR plan with the RPO, RTO, the tabletop exercise. How like quarter to quarter or once in a 6 month we need to execute the DRs to know the fact what is RPO, what is RTO, and how we can reduce the RPO like data loss and the recovery time objective.
So, Prasad and Sanjay, you said in the beginning, Prasad, that the kind of challenges have changed, right? But now ask you a more direct question here. Prasad, probably you can take a cue on this, because this is a question which has to be common, because I'm sure there'll be other areas that Sanjay would like to add in. What are some of your real-time challenges? When you speak about data backup and storage, and maybe DR as well. Because what I see, and I'm just calling it out. You may want to espouse further or probably add in. We see the surge in purely the volume of data has increased exponentially. The amount that you had to manage 5 years back to now is multiple folds. That's A. Secondly, long-term retention, data archival, and the associated challenge of data retrieval. There's a lot of data loss in the process. There's corruption of data, encryption, decryption, that there's data loss, so on and so forth, right? So this is what we gathered by speaking to others. Prasad, I would like you to, and the fourth point again, sorry, very importantly, 10 years back when we looked at data, maybe 90% to 95% was structured data. Now is not the case. There are a lot of organizations which are looking at unstructured data and creating a lot of information out of that. And I need to get that also correct. Your views.
Correct. Absolutely. So, yeah, you rightly said volume of data is definitely one of a challenge, because earlier the data volume itself was very low. Finding out crown jewel and having their synchronization time, right, with the DR side more frequently than the non-critical data was absolutely possible. One of a challenge that has now become is, and again, post-pandemic, most of these employees are working in a hybrid mode, right? And they are having their endpoints along with them outside my perimeter network, where most of my core infrastructure lies, right? In terms of even backup or any other applications. Now, I also have good amount of data sitting on the endpoints, right, that they are carrying, which is obviously exposed out to the internet, right? The endpoint is exposed to the internet directly outside my perimeter security network, right? So protecting that endpoint is definitely one challenge. Keeping it updated is definitely another challenge. But more than that, getting that data into my backup and recovery strategy is a major challenge. Okay, and it is a challenge not only because of the technology limitations, but more than that, the amount of bandwidth it takes to take this entire data backed up onto your centralized solution every day, right? And I'm not talking to an organization with 500 or 1,000 employees. I'm talking about an organization with at least 10,000, 20,000 or more than that, right? Getting that information into backup and recovery strategies is very, very difficult. And we have seen cases wherein, if I look at the number of restoration that we had to do in last 1 year or 2 years, right? More the number of cases were about recovering the data from the endpoints than my core infrastructure, like storage and backup or servers. Okay, even in cloud now it has become flawless for backup and recovery, but endpoint is definitely a pain point still.
Prasad, thank you so much. Sanjay, in your view, like I said, Prasad, and I think you somewhere in the beginning said that I think the great point that you're making and it becomes very relevant today's context when we have so much of hybrid work actually going on.
Right.
So when we talk about business continuity disaster recovery, it is not. Typically BCDR is infrastructure support. Your
Definitely.
backend infrastructure data backup. But what you need to understand when you have ransomware attacks, one of the easiest threat is your endpoint, because it is connected many a time to open in the internet world, right? So I think you make a great point, a point which was not relevant 2 years back, because 95% of us always used to work out of office spaces, right? So having a hybrid work has its own challenges also, even from a business continuity standpoint. Sanjay, anything you would like to add to this? And I'll probably extend this, talking about cybersecurity, as a landscape of, cybersecurity is evolving. How can, organization like yours, and probably you already have done that, integrate your BCDR strategy with cyber resilience? Something that I'm sure has happened now, it was not the case earlier. Your views, Sanjay.
Okay, so to be very honest, when we say the BCP and the DRs, there are three things is again involved, like the people, process, and the technology. So there's no problem with the technology, no problem with the process. And this, yes, when we're talking on the BCP and DR execution and the test, we need the right people and the right skills. Example, when we say the structured and unstructured data, so it requires a skill to restore it, and how much time it requires to restore it. How do we restore it? And then what should be the mechanism to restore it? So right, every point, like example, we need 5 people for the business continuity and disaster recovery for their backup also. And their execution time, example, Prasad say the perimeter, right? So we need to be check it like what's the traffical route from the DNS, what are the application will be the front ending. So application guy, one is from the network guy, third thing from security who can do the rule routes and nettings. Fourth thing is like the backup is very important. The backup test. How did we test it? Like full backup restore, incremental backup restore, and how frequently we test it up. What are the critical errors if we are restoring the backup? So this also is a major and critical exercise. This has to be done. And there's a critical in the disaster recovery business continuity is the drill will be failure. Like if you do the DR drill, it can be the failure. So these are major things, skills in the people. So a lot of people decided because of the on the cloud DRAS, like the disaster recovery as a services, because of the skills and the people problems.
I was reserving the point on disaster recovery as service for a later discussion, but I'm glad that you brought it up, and I'll come back to that. But Prasad, in your view, because you're a very experienced CISO, I know how you look at the entire processes and technology stack separately, right? And how 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 do you feel? Which are some of the benefits, of creating this combined entity of BCDR and cybersecurity? I mean, considering that you've gravitated towards, looking at cybersecurity and BCDR from a single lens, what are some of the benefits that you would like to share with the audience, who's probably thinking on embarking on the same as we speak?
So earlier there were two different functions who used to take care of backup and recovery, which was more on an IT part, right? IT infrastructure and service management part of it. And cybersecurity was always, or information security was always a different team altogether, right? They used to do auditing and all that, but they were not so closely working together, right? And I think now with the kind of changes happening in the environment, right? Now they are working very closely. In fact, if you look at in our environment, right, the BCP manager for the organization reports into CISO. Okay? So the business continuity manager reports into CISO. Even the risk officer, right, for the organization has a dotted line to the CISO, because the risk need not be only IT or cybersecurity related risk. There could be different risks from the business as well, which has a correlation with how your IT infrastructure DRBCP is configured, okay, or arranged in the organization. And that is where CISO has a very important role to play in IT DR, strategy of the organization and recovery. And as I mentioned earlier as well, right, the reason why these two teams were separate was the kind of incidences which used to result into recovery data were purely onto IT infrastructure side. Whereas now, if you look at the incidences which majorly contribute to data restoration requirement belongs to the cyber attacks, right? And that is where these two teams has to work hand in hand. I highly appreciate this fact that if a BCP manager reports into CISO, that will really give him a real benefit to the organization to have a better strategy of recovery.
Now, for all those who are listening, I think the great point that Prasad makes. I mean, while you all have the liberty of choosing your company structures, but I see a lot of credence in what you just said, Prasad, because because all of this, it may be wrong to say the cybersecurity is a subset of BCDR or the other way around. It is, it is mutually inclusive. I mean, that's the way I look at this. I mean, very rightly pointed out, Prasad. Sanjay, I'll bring an element. Like, as we all know, nowadays the entire BCP on cloud, in fact, your DR sites on cloud, is something that is not so uncommon. I won't say everybody has moved into a cloud environment. That also, let's be very clear about this. In a market like India, there's still a huge amount of growth in terms of companies moving the DR site on cloud. They're still on premise, and there are obviously very strong reasons for them to have it on premises. But in your view, Sanjay, apart from one very significant reason, what it's economical for you to move your, say, BCP or your DR on cloud. So that's although now there are a lot of discussions about, a lot of people repatriating and so on and so forth. So, but let's not digress there. What are some of the other benefits that you would probably like to share with our friends here, which may be kept into consideration while moving, your BCP or DR onto cloud?
Okay, so basically, one of the definitive, when I say the financial cost is a major important things. Earlier, when we're talking like the 5 year and 3 years back, when we're talking on the business continuity, we talk of the hot side, the cold side, the mobile side, and then the moving side, we can create a vehicle, the number of services. So there's a new form coming in the market is saying that, okay, the banking, they can be DC and DR like the on-premises. Right. So some of the organizations like commercial, a lot of the page, they don't have any problem because of the compliance. So they're planning because of the cost, they are DR on a cloud. So one is on premises, second on a DR. In case of you are upgrading your applications, you are operating system issues. So you have the flexibility to increase like the RAM, the CPU, the storage. And there's no, like example, if you want to upgrade your hardware, you need a dedicated RAM in case of on premises. So the cost is major. We can say the cost is a major involvement. So that's flexibility of entire, you can increase your number of applications, the load balancer, the sizing. So there's no limitation of the hardware and infra size. You can optimize according to the requirement. So there's the reason.
So Sanjay and Prasad, let me share some data points here. So like I said, we had asked, and I think it's a great point because I want Prasad's input on this. So when we ask our friends, this question on what are your reasons for choosing a cloud-based BCDR solution, 72% people have said automated backup and restore capabilities. I think the great point, because that's one of the, in fact, as a product differentiation also, a lot of modern BCDR solutions are pivoted around the fact that you have automated backup, something which was not there earlier. So what are your views around this?
Absolutely right input, Aplak. See, and I think we discussed it some time back, right? That IT resources in itself is a bigger challenge nowadays, right? That everybody is facing, right? Qualified resources who understands technology, who understand process in the organization, and can execute to achieve the goals in itself is a challenge, right? Now, and the number of users are increasing, the data is increasing, the number of hybrid scenario in which we have to do backup and restoration is increasing, right? Now, if we continue with our traditional approach towards backup and disaster recovery, it is not going to suffice the requirement of the modern organizations, right? And I think that is where this automation is going to be very, very important, and not only in backup restoration, but in every field of IT, automation is very, very important, right? And obviously, it has a lot of benefits the organization, right? And it like starts from, if you automate the things, you will get more time to focus onto the core areas, right? Rather than keeping ourselves busy into the traditional ways, right? With cloud-based backup restoration, the scalability is really high. I mean, today, if I do an acquisition of another organization worth 1,000 or 2,000 employees, right, which is the smallest acquisition, I would say, and want to bring them aboard onto my organization, right? Getting them into my processes become very easy if I have cloud-based or automation solutions, right? So there are a number of benefits that we can get out of the automation, and of course, in terms of resiliency and recovery, right? If we have an automated ways of backing up and restoration as well, one of a very important factor is self service of restoration, which is very important, right? So if in case of any unfortunate ransomware attack, if thousands of endpoints are getting encrypted, right? To how many endpoint IT can help them recover, right? They cannot. I mean, we have a limited number of people in IT. So if we can really have a solution which can give us a self-service even for restoration of the endpoint, right? Or restoration of the data. See, that automation is going to help a lot to the organization to recover faster and achieve better RPO and RTO.
Right. Prasad, I'll ask Sanjay. Sanjay, you spoke sometime back about disaster recovery as a service, right? Do you feel that we now, I mean, for organizations operating in India, particularly, we're now, you feel disaster service is something worthy of being tried out? And if so, some of the 3 top benefits that you see for you moving on that line, because as we all know, your DR on cloud and DR as a service are totally different things.
Right.
So just because I think I wanted to call this out. Sanjay, over to you.
Okay, so basically, if you see, there are different type of organization. When I say the startup, the mid-level organizations, and the large organizations. So mid-level organizations and the below, then they can go with the, because of definitely IT budget is the one thing. Second is the CIO, CISO, and the staff is another thing. That's depending on the business continuity. That's a key factor. Number thing, as Prasad says, the quality of resources can be part of the disaster recovery. Without that, definitely the mock drill, anything there will be the fail. And everyone is like, when you're talking the business resiliency, business availability is the first priority from the post-COVID right now. So everything is moving on the internet. So this we say the mid-level and the other organization is the more beneficial for, instead of putting effort on like the administrator, server administrator, network administrator, the backup administrator, the testings, the application developer, and then when we say the 360-degree security, like the code security towards cable to cloud, we need the people definitely. There's a major issues in the market right now. So in case the cloud setup, the cloud DR as well as the DR is, I mean, BCP services, DR, DRES is a good example for them. So they can have like the automated backup. You said rightly, one of the examples. So there's a major challenge of taking a backup, restoring the backup, and what is the frequency of the backup, plus backup security even. So ransomware attacker can attack and they can encrypt the data. So this also is a major challenge for the BCP and DR. So that can be taken care by either the vendor, either the SI, and somebody who's managing your cloud and then taking off your security.
Right. Prasad, let me just flip this question. The other way of looking at it is, you may feel that disaster recovery as a service is a viable option. I mean, it's a good option to explore, but considering that I have a lot of GRC, and I mean, are there possible challenges to adopt? There are times when you want to adopt a certain solution, technology, or a service, but you see some impediments around that. What are some of the typical impediments if one wants to go to DRS? And because when you call this out for our audience, they'll be able to understand how to overcome them also.
Yes, see, there are GRC challenges, governance risk compliance challenges in terms of adoption of various technologies. And I have predominantly seen it while adopting AI-based solutions, right? AI-based cloud solutions where the data is getting into the cloud, right? There are a lot of governance and risk challenges that we have seen, and we're trying to mitigate those in some of the cases. But yes, in case of even BRDC, this is going to be a challenge because we are uplifting the data from on-premise, from critical servers, right, applications into a third-party cloud, where the assurance of security, right, around that data, and of course the three principle of confidentiality, integrity, and availability of the data, wherever we are keeping it, is very, very important, right? And when we look at these business requirements, we definitely look for OEMs and partner who showcase this, right? That they are, for them, all these three CI triads are the top priority while serving us as a customer. Right? And of course, there are process controls like data privacy agreement, non-disclosure agreements, and of course, availability agreements for our data. Those are kind of controls which helps us while choosing such partners.
Lovely, lovely. Sanjay, Prasad, thank you so much for all your inputs. But I'd like to close in after one common question, because I think it's important that we give a foresight or a future view to this entire discussion. How, and I'm not asking you to contain your answer to just BCDR as a point solution. As we can clearly see, this is not a point solution. It's a more strategic way of looking at things. How do you look at what is the future of business resilience from an organization perspective? Sanjay, I probably request you to take it up. Then I'll request Prasad to conclude this.
So basically, when we're talking about business resilience, obviously the availability is an important factor, and the data security. So availability and the data security will be two major important factor, and then BCP will be apart from it. So BCP is IT's supporting function to the business.
Right. Fair enough. Point taken, Sanjay. Prasad, your final words before we call it a day.
Sure. See, with the kind of changes those are happening, right? Every organization is now talking about digitalization of the business, right? Which means certain processes which were manual earlier now getting digitalized, right? The paper-based work is getting into a digital form, right? Which means we are increasingly relying on data in a digital format, right? And on the other side, the number of attacks, those are increasing, right? To steal this data, the availability of the information that we have in digital format. So for any organization who is into this journey of digitalization and going further, this will go on increasing. I think business resiliency is going to be very, very important, because it is becoming a big threat to the continuity of the business itself, right? So sustainability of the organization now depends on how better we are in terms of recovering ourselves from any incident. And this is going to be a number one challenge for even the board meetings, right? We have now representations in board that how are we ensuring cybersecurity and business continuity of our business in case of any disaster. So that's the future of it. It is going to be very, very important and one of our key discussions in the board meetings nowadays.
Like I always say, Prasad, I could not have put it better. Like you said, the future of business continuity is very strongly associated with business resilience. I think that is a thought that is echoed by both you and Sanjay. Always a pleasure talking to both of you. I like to stick to today's timeline. These discussions have no end to themselves. But for today, I'll call it an end. Sanjay, thank you so much. Prasad, thank you so much. Hope to have many more interesting conversations like this in the future. Thank you for now.
Thank you so much.